Hello everybody, and welcome to this session of Educandi, where we're going to talk about follow-up and evaluation and optimization of different forecast series. Today's presenters will be me, Alexander Nordling, and with me I also have Christer.
Yes, hi there everybody. And I will mostly talk of taking care of the questions which you perhaps have during the session.
And a little bit about today's agenda. So first, our session is a presentation of the follow-up. More in specific, what I will talk about is the extracts and the extract settings, the weather weighing, and dynamic fractions. So I'll try to put emphasis on extracts and the other two as well. Then we will have a 10-minute break where you can take some coffee, think if you have any questions, something that you want me to or Christer to explain further, and then we will have time after the break to answer your questions as well, to show you if there's anything that you want to know. So let's start then. So why do we do follow-up? So follow-up is a way of looking how well you are doing. So you're comparing your made and forecasts to measured values. We do this to find errors in forecasts, that when you have big deviation in forecast accuracy. Why did something happen? Was it because of weather or something else? And we do it to try to improve our setting, if we're thinking about investing in a new weather provider, it's a good way of evaluating a new provider and to optimize costs in that way, to see can we utilize two to get even better forecast accuracy, and that way improve our forecast and so on. And it's a very fast way of getting feedback, and it's a very easy way to look at it. You can see it in graph or in statistics and so on. And our aim for this is to be a very fast system. So we have a lot of settings, it's very flexible, so you can do and you can compare a lot of things and optimize a lot of things. But once you have set it up, the aim is for it to really be just a one-click system. So all you need to do is just to choose choose the play button and follow up in Aiolos. So what can we do? We can compare different weather suppliers or weather stations together, or not only compare but also weight them and try to utilize all the positive benefits from each provider. We can compare and use multiple calculation models or alternative forecasts even. You can find out the value of if you need to work weekends or night shifts compared to having the system run automatically. You can look at day ahead versus intraday, so you can look at different forecast horizons, compare manual versus automatic, and you can also see user-specific results. So if you're doing something special that you want to follow up how your progress is, then you can easily do so. And there are different ways of evaluating these. So in the follow-up tab, you can see it in graph form, which have zooming possibility, and you can also see it in statistics or in grid formats and so on. So you have different key elements of looking at it. So, and all with their own benefits. So you have statistic key figures, but you have the graph to quickly see where say specific days where it has the accuracy have deviated more or less other days. And then it's easy to toggle between different resolutions, so you can have the original one if you have it in 60 minute, 5 minute, between then daily, weekly, and so on. And also you can easily evaluate different levels as well and toggle between the different levels. So look at not only the forecast series, what it has produced, but also how does it compare on the aggregated level. Does it transcend there as well, the same. And as we said, you can evaluate different time horizons, so you can easily look at 45 minutes ahead, 6 hours, day ahead, a week ahead, and so on. And then just choose from the extract settings really what you want to look at. And this really leads me into the next part. So with the extract settings and how to choose or to get the forecast that you want. So if you have several forecasts for the same period, you're interested in a certain day. So for here, for example, we are interested in Wednesday. Then you should know, should you have the gray, the red, the green, or the darker gray forecast here. So we have 4 different forecasts for the same period saved, but we need only 24 hours and we need from one of those. So how do we then tell the system which of these we should use? So then we can set an hours to ignore. And this way we say if you want to ignore, you set that within this limit you don't want to use any forecast. So this is a time deadline from when the forecast should have been made. And if it's made after that, if it would be in the red zone, then you would disregard it. And then after that we set a search period for when was the forecast created. So you set a period for how long do we allow, or how old do we allow the forecast to be. And then it will take, depending on your settings, but you can set it to take the latest possible. So within this yellow area here, it will take the latest made forecast. So in this case, it would take the afternoon forecast. If we would prolong the hours to ignore, so it would cover this afternoon forecast, then it would use the 11 o'clock forecast instead. So like this, if we would make it this hours to ignore longer, then we could specify that it's the red one. So by telling the system how long, what's our extraction period, so how long should the length of the forecast, how long should it be, and then from the start point, how many hours backwards should we ignore. So what's the deadline, when is the latest allowed forecast made, and then the newest within the search period is how we specify the exact forecast. Then you can have multiple there as well, and you can specify it further with saying that you want it manual or automatic and so on. But in the extract settings, you set these limits. So you set first you set the length of the extract to 24, 72 or so on. Then you specify hours to ignore. So for day ahead, a typical would be 12 hours. So it should be, the deadline would be at 12 the day before, when the latest possible, so when the deadline for the spot market, for example, closes. But you could also set it longer if you're interested in the 9 a.m. forecast or anything similar. And then you specify how long is the search period. So how long after that, how old do we allow it to be? are we interested in only the newest ones? And if we have, then if we don't have a forecast there, then we want to see maybe a gap in the follow-up as well, because then we know that, okay, we didn't succeed in making a forecast within 6 hours from the hours to ignore. And where is this then in the follow-up? So the starting point, the start of the extract is taken from the date, so from the start date, really. So that's where the starting point starts. So for example, here it would be 2015 and the 1st of February and hour 1. That's the start of the extract. And then you have the extract length, and that's the length of the forecast that you want to evaluate. So in this example, that would be 24 hours from this, so 1 day. And then hours to ignore, again, repetition, but that's where we're looking for profiles or forecasts that are made that are older than this hours set here. So you're setting a deadline for when it should be made, the latest. And then the search period for within this time period it should have been made. So we want it to be not older than, say, if this would be 6 hours from the 12 hours to ignore. So it should be made that day. And when we have specified this, then you make a forecast each day. And our way of doing this is our way of building a timeline from several forecasts, so that you're always evaluating the day ahead forecast. So first you have one forecast that is made, and you're picking out 24 hours from that. So you're cutting out 24 hours for Tuesday. Then the next day you have made a new forecast. Then you are taking 24 hours from that, and then we're cutting and piecing it together with the Tuesday, and then Thursday, and so on. And this way we're building really a timeline which we then can compare easily to the historical measured values. So you have two timelines set against each other. But this day ahead timeline is actually constructed of several forecasts. So for 3 days you would have 3 forecasts. And if you're evaluating a week, you would have 7, and so on. And then there are different, by setting these, you can easily mix what you want to look at. So I want to show you a couple of examples as well, so you can see the difference and how it works. So for example, if we then are interested in evaluating 3 days ahead, then what we are doing is that we are setting the hours to ignore much longer. So here you can see that the start date is here, but we're ignoring the first day, the second day, and then half of Friday as well. And then we're searching for forecast made on Friday. Then we're taking out the Monday. And then same thing for the next one. You're taking the forecast made on Saturday, and then Sunday, and so on. And then you get always the 3 days ahead forecast in this way. So by expanding the hours to ignore, you can set the evaluation to 2 days ahead, 3 days ahead, and so on. So this way it's really easy to specify which time horizon you are interested in. Or if you want to evaluate weekend leave, for example. So here, if you're away on Saturday and Sunday, if you would have had 6 hours search period, you wouldn't have found any forecast made on Sunday for Monday, because you're away on weekend leave. Then you have to expand the search period so that it covers also Friday. And this way you can take Friday's forecast, because that's when you have made the Monday forecast you have made on Friday. And then on Tuesday you take the forecast that is made on Monday, because it's covered in this yellow area Monday as well. And then Wednesday you take Tuesday. So you take the newest made latest possible forecast. And in this way you can take the forecast from Friday, so that you don't get any gaps from Monday just because you haven't been on work on the weekend. Yes. And this way also, by expanding the search period, you can also easily simulate on what's the benefit of working on weekends or automating it on weekends. So you can have one day, normal day ahead, and take the automatic forecast, which would be compiled like this for the weekend. Or you can have a longer search period that always covers Friday, and it would, the Saturday forecast would be covered in this search period, and the Sunday would also, so it would pick or it would extract Saturday from the same forecast as Sunday, but it would also always look for the newest. But if you haven't made any newer ones, then it would take the one on Friday still. So this way you can easily see the value of working weekends or not. And then by setting a longer extraction, then you can look at, for example, how is my 3-day forecast or my weekly forecast. So by expanding the extract hours, so how long should the length of our forecast that we're evaluating be, you change what you're looking at. So for this example, we're evaluating weekly forecast, so we have set it to 168 hours should be extracted. So then we extract 1 week, and then after that we take the next week, and after that the next week. And but in this way we are always piecing weeks together instead of days. So you can piece 2 days together or shorter periods as well. So you can set 1 hour, and always for every hour you start piecing every hour together. So in this way we're building up a functioning timeline then that can be evaluated. And looking a little bit on the follow-up promises, what we can follow up. So first we have the manual versus automatic. We have a mode setting. So default is any, but you can specify it to only look at forecasts that are made automatically, or only forecasts that are made manually. So this way you can easily say which one you are looking at. And also the user-specific results. So you have a user list. Default here again is any, but then you can have multiple users and specify which user's forecast you want to look at. If you want to look at your own forecast, for example, that you have made changes to and so on, that you know that you made manual changes on really a lot of manual changes 1 week, then you want to follow up how did those manual changes actually go and transcend, and then you can easily follow up those changes. And then the day ahead versus intraday, or more forecast horizons, is done here in the temporal filter. So this is what we have been more or less been covering all this time so far. So here you can specify this. So for example, day ahead you would have extracted period 24 hours, normal period to ignore 12 hours, search period could be 6 but longer, 24 is okay as well, or 12 hours. Then you just take the latest possible forecast. And then for intraday, you would change the extracted period to, say, 1 hour, and then period to ignore to 45 minutes, and then a shorter search period to make sure that you have the intraday, but you can also have there the longest and then just take the latest possible made forecast. And here also you have the value of working weekends, nights, as I was talking about. So you can both choose. You can look at it from the manual and automatic perspective. So you can and you can set also, and you should also set the temporal filter right. So you should prolong the search period, and so on. So that's, yeah. So for example, if you're looking at working weekend, it could be 24 to 72 hours, depending on how you want to look at it. But yeah, this is a very easy way to set it, so that you make sure to look at the forecast that is made on the right time by the right person or by the right scheduled job. So then you know what you're comparing against each other. And important to stress here is as well that, again, that we have a lot of options you can look at a lot of different things, but the aim is that once you have set it up, so when you have set up an extract setting for manual weekend forecasts, then it's already set up and it's just one click away to just choose that option, and then you can easily evaluate it, as well as automatic and manual and day ahead or intraday or weekly forecast and so on. So this is a one-time setup thing, and once it's set up, it's just to choose that setting and then you know what you're looking at. Yeah. So for the next part, I'm going to talk to you about the weather weighing. So our standard way of weighing our weathers together is that we have 5 different weather stations or weather providers connected to one forecast series, and for each of these weather forecasts we make one energy forecast, and then we have 5 different energy forecasts that we always save away as well. So you can compare them one by one, or when you weigh them together, you weigh the energy forecasts together to one optimal weighted energy forecast. And this we can do in several intervals. So we have divided our days up to 12-hour intervals, so that you can utilize if, say, one weather provider is better for a short-term forecasting and another is better for long-term, then you can use more from the one that is better on short-term and less on the one that for the first hours, and then more on the one that is better on long-term on the later hours. And if one is longer, then you can also, for the last row here, so for the last interval, you can set 100% on that. Then you always know that you will have energy forecast based on forecasted weather and not normal climate weather. And our structure of our forecast series looks like this. So you have one forecast series, and this is then divided up or connected to 5 different weather stations. And each of these weather stations is compiled of 2 weather series. So you have one forecast series and one observation series. And both of these are then connected to a climate series also. But what we are really basing our optimization on is more our energy forecast that is based on this forecast series for each of these stations. of course, the model is based on the observation series and built based on that for each one as well. But then the weighting is for the forecast series, more in simplified terms. And what we do here then is that we use so when we have a load forecast and an energy forecast, we're making 5 different forecasts, as we said, 5 different energy forecasts. So we have a pure energy forecast for each one of these 5. And then we're telling it, or either manually, or we're letting the system optimize how much from each weather station we should use. And then we compile these 5 together to one final and optimized weather forecast. So as you can see here from what we are doing, we are taking 30% from weather station 1, so we're taking 0.3 times the load forecast for weather station 1, and then 10%, so 0.1 times for the load forecast based on the weather forecast from weather station 2, and so on. And then we're adding these together to create our final forecast. And then we also have a constant as well that we are adding to, that you can add to as well. But this is also an optional choice, so you can shut it off as well if you want to. So you can, it's a possibility to do. And these they don't necessarily have to be, the percentage doesn't need to be 100%, and it doesn't need to be positive either. You can use up to more than 100% from one, or that the that the sum will be more than 100% in terms of if you're having a bias fault, that you're always a little bit lower than you should be, then this weighting can take care of that and raise it up to the right level. And this is very good thing about this. So if you're noticing a bias fault, then weather weighing usually takes care of this bias fault. But that's also optional, and you can constrain it not to do so. And you can also use negative values to subtract instead of add, so that you're creating the actual optimal mix of all of these load forecasts. Yeah. And then yeah, as I was saying, then we have different tolerances of these, so that you don't, and you will get this as a warning when you're applying the weights. So you don't have to accept any kind of weighing. It will give you a suggestion of what it thinks is optimal, but if it exceeds your tolerances, you don't need to accept that as a weighing. So for example, you have the maximum sum of absolute weights and how big it could be. So this would be 25% over 100. So you can't raise it up for, you can't add how much together as you want. It needs to be, the final sum needs to be under 1.25. And in the same way, the minimum sum of weights need to be over 75%. So this gives you restraints and tolerances on how much it can, say, play around with the weights. And the constant then, which is added to the forecast, is set to be how much of the relative, or how much relative to the mean load, how big it can be. So you take the mean load, and then you see how it can't be over 5% of that. So it can't grow to how big it can grow. How big can't be how big as possible. Yeah, you set constraints for it. But the important part of this weighing is that it's really, really useful, and I think that I will show you how to do this soon in a demo as well. But if you're using this, it's a really good thing. But if not, it's really recommended by us that you start using it and that you set it up either by yourself or that you contact some of us that we can help you set this up, because this is something that we have seen being beneficial for many of our clients. And next we will go to dynamic fractions. So dynamic fractions, you can see it in the series tree based on this symbol. It will be this blue pie chart, and when you hover over it, you will also see what's the percentage, what's the fraction of of the forecast load that you have. What it does, it sums up quite similarly to the weather weighing. So it sums up with a percentage of the forecast and adds on a constant as well. And just like the weather, it also changes values at hours ahead. So we have also divided this up into intervals. So you have 12 hours intervals for this as well. And the dynamic fraction is very good for if you want to evaluate or optimize separate subseries, which can be subseries of, it can be models, you can have different weather points, external forecasts, or anything other, and then you can easily create copies of one forecast series and have multiple models, multiple weather points, external forecast for that metering point, and then just either you can have a static weighing using static percentage from each, or you can let the system try to optimize from which you should use, which of these forecasts should you use. Yeah, and of course you can also you can also evaluate them. But yeah, the great thing about the dynamic fraction is the option and the possibility to really weigh them together and use and utilize the best parts from each forecast. And if you compare it to other tools, as we've said, you can have alternative models or multiple weather points connected to it, but then you might ask yourself the question that, but we already have the weather weighing and the 5 weather station, why should we use dynamic fractions? Well, that's true, and the multiple weather forecast, then you have its simple configuration. It's what standard we set up, so you have the 5 points, but it also limits you to only 5 different weather points or 5 different weather providers. So if you want to have more than that, then you can expand your weather points or providers by having dynamic fractions instead. And the same thing with alternative models. You can connect up to 8 models to each of your forecasting series, and it's a very easy way of switching between models from each series, and it's a simple configuration again, but it also limits you from not being able to weight them together in this case. So with the dynamic fractions, if you set different models on model place 1 and you have them set up as copies of one forecasting series and adding them up with dynamic fractions, then you can utilize both models and both the alternative models and try to use a mixture of them instead of always using one or another. So this way we're trying to again optimize the result for you. So the dynamic fractions tool is a very, very, very flexible tool, and you can build your series tree more or less how you want it and compare different things and different ways of making forecasts and always just weigh them together. and you can export, and even if you're weighing them together, you can also export them separately so that you get the pure Aiolos model forecast, for example, if you want that, or from one weather point if you want that. So you don't restrict yourself to the weighted forecast either. You can export each alternative and combine external forecasts. The only negative point I would say is what also the positive point is, that it's very flexible and you can expand everything, so you have a lot of possibilities for what you want to do, and it's important that you have a clear vision, I think, of what you want to achieve and how to achieve it. So that's maybe one of the challenges with setting this up, that you have a lot of possibilities and then you might be in a dilemma of what to choose. But that's also another dilemma if you let the system choose for you and you make the evaluation, then you're really taking out the guesswork of it all. And then, next one. So looking up on promises that we talked about in the beginning, different weather suppliers and different stations and alternative forecast and calculations models. So the weather you compare in the selection. So that's where you set up to compare different weather and to optimize the weather as well. And then for calculations model and alternative forecast, is best done, or one of the ways done is with the dynamic fraction. So here, for example, if you only want to use Aiolos forecast, you can still put this on 100% and these two others on 0, but then you can backtest and evaluate still, and then see how much could we have improved, or how good would it have been if we would have utilized both Aiolos and Celia model and also the external forecast model. And for all of these evaluations and optimizations, we benchmark with quite standard key statistical figures. So our error measurements are quite standardized. So we have the mean error, relative mean absolute, as well as relative mean absolute, and then root of mean squared and relative as well. And then max absolute error, and then we have counts to see how much data you have in terms of historical values. So next up, I will try to show you this within the system as well. So if we jump to Aiolos, and then we go to the follow-up tab. And here you can see that this is all more or less predefined, so it should be really just a one-click system. Here you can choose what template for what you want to evaluate. Now I want to evaluate this template, which are these 3 series. Then you have all your extracts, and then some of it predefined. I want to look at the day ahead. Then you have your evaluation date, which is also can be set to something, so that it's always set. But now I want to change it to start from 20th of November, for example. So it's easy to change as well. And then this will be 14 days, and you can easily just add or subtract days. And then it's just to click play, and then you have made quick evaluation of these 2 weeks between these dates, and for the day ahead for consumption area A, and also for the Aiolos and Celia forecast separately. And here you can see it in graph form, which is easy to, as I said, you can zoom in to look with bird eye. You can move easily between the days to see if we have any large gaps, special days, and maybe try to see why these were, and so on. We can zoom out. Then you have the same values as you have here. You also have in grid form that you can see. And then you have your key figures in statistics as well. So you can see how well you are performing. So for consumption area A, we're at 2.28, for example. And if you want to change extract, for example, you can have several collections here, but you can also add a collection. And here you have, then you come to this screen, and this would be a collection screen, so all your extract that you want, all the settings you want to look at would be in this, and all available settings are in this square here. So we can call this Kandi, for example. And then you can have the 1 day ahead. If you click on this zooming glass, then you can look at the settings for it. So this would be this was a 1 day ahead extract setting. So we have a 6-hour search period. Period to ignore is set to 12 hours. And then we have 24 hours for the extracted period. And if we want to make, for example, we can make, so we can choose that we want to have a day ahead, and then compare it if, then we can make a new one. So we can set for, say, the 3 day ahead forecast. So then we have 24 hours still as extracted period. Then we would choose 60 hours to ignore, and then 12 hours search period. Then you can also, here you have all these different settings of, you can specify it to a certain type of export type. So if it's an Excel export you only want to look at, or XML or init, then it's easy to specify which one you want to look at. The mode is where you set if you want to look at the automatic or the manual and compare those two together. The user, you can see all our different users for this right here. And you can specify one user if you want to. Let's call this 3 days ahead. Like that. And then click OK. And then we can rerun this. Yeah. Then now we have 2 different graphs that we're looking at. So we're looking at the 1 day ahead forecast and 3 days ahead. And this way you can have multiple different settings. So you can have the 1 day ahead manual, 1 day ahead automatic, the weekend and the automatic, and so on. So it's easy to expand this and to look at many different settings. Then for the weather, as we said, when you compare weather together, you're in the selections. So here you can have different selection collections. So I have 2, one individual weather and one optimal weights. So if you choose the individual weather and run it, you can see that we have the exported. So that's the one that's been combined by the 3 different ones. And then we have the weather 1, the 2, and the 3. And then you can see them all also as well in the statistics. And it's easy to also, by just clicking this, you can see rank them by relative mean absolute error, for example. And we can see from this, we can see that weather 3 and 2 actually perform better than the exported. But the exported, which is weighted together, perform better than weather 1. So here's what we can conclude from this, for example, would be that we want to change something, that we have better weather than we are exporting. And if we look at the settings for these selections, then you have the same collections here. So here you have the available selections and the ones that you are added to this collection. That's what you're looking at here, the weather 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. And if you want to look at the settings for each one, you can go on this magnifying glass icon. And for the manual here, if you're only looking at weather 1, you have a manual weighting and you're setting 100% on weather 1 for the whole forecast range. And this, if you want to set up a new one, that's, say, if you want to see what if you use 30% of each, then you can have manual and you just type in 0.33, 0.33, 0.33. Oh yeah, 0.34. And this will then, the green light will indicate that you now have 100%, that the sum of these are 100%, but they don't need to be. You can add them more or less as well. So in this way you can easily see test static weighings as well. And this is also a one-time setup, so this I could call even weights, for example. Then I can add them to my collection, click OK, then rerun. And then we can see easily how just by setting static weights that we can improve fast also our current weights that we have. So that is better than number 2, but not better than number 3. So to get even further, the next recommend would be to let the system optimize it for you and try to optimize all these 3 based on regression. And I have a selection for this already, but we can look at the settings. So we view the selections, and here you have the optimal weights. Let's view that. So what you have here is we have added 6 intervals, and by clicking and marking these intervals, you choose what which parts should be added into this optimal weighting. So we are adding everything here. So here you are optimizing all of these, but you can also choose this, and then we can also, if you want to, you could also only have the last one from one weather. If you know that that's the longest weather, then it would only use weather from this, because that's the only weather provider available for weighing for this interval here. So this is how you choose what to take with to the optimization. Then for the different parts here, I will go through the importance parts and the ones that are important to get started with this. And if you have more questions or want more detail about this, then we can talk more about it in the question hours. So for example, these F values, these are default values, and I think that they can be left as such for getting started. But these are more interesting, the normalized weights and allow negative weights. So if you have it set like this, then you're not normalizing, so you're allowing it to grow further or larger than 100%, the sum of these 3, so they don't have to be summed up to 100%. And by allowing negative weights, you're also allowing them to subtract, not only to add. So you're really giving the the program free hands here to really try to find the optimal solution. And then we still have our tolerances. So as we talked about earlier, you have the maximum sum of the absolute weights and the minimum sum of weights, and how large the constant can be. And this will then it will warn you if it exceeds these tolerances. And then we have the date settings for optimization, and this is a really interesting and fun setting, I think. At this point we are using the evaluated period, so we're basing our optimization on the evaluated period. And the evaluated period is what you have here. So we are basing now our optimization on the same period that we are evaluating. But we can also choose not to use the evaluated period and to choose a period that's before the start of our evaluation period. This way we can try to mimic real life in terms of because when you're weighing or when you're sharp and you're weighing, or when you're live and you're weighing in operational use, then you're using only data that you have, but you're weighing it for the future. So you don't know how well it will, what the impact will be in the future still. And this way you can really try to see how well does it do that by setting the evaluation period for, say, 60 days or 30 days before the evaluation start date. And you can see that how well does it optimize, and how well does that weighing transcend to the future and to the evaluation period. So this is I think it's a good tool to look how well it does. Yeah, and then and if you're uncertain, if you have a very volatile series, then you also can, if you're uncertain that you will start to get these big values in the weighing, then you can also choose just to normalize it and not allow negative weights. Then it will still take the optimal factors from each weather provider, but it doesn't have as free hands, so it's not the optimal solution, but it's the best for, in terms of if you have it normalized. So you're in that way you're really restricting it, but you're maybe, say, more secure and more, you're sure that of how much you're using from each. Yeah, so let's run a standard optimal weights then for this. We can see how well we could have done. So 1.94 was the best so far. And now we can see that for this period we could have still gone down a lot further than that as well. So you can see how it's been trying to add for these periods and so on, so you get a lot much better result. But for this optimal weighing, of course, you need to gather data for this, and you need to have data saved, so you have enough data to make this weighing on. And when you start with something, we usually set your first start weights, and we recommend you not to just use, say, one weather provider, because it's better to set an even weight, as we can see just from this run, than just using the one, because you're more secure in terms of you don't, for these 2 weeks weather 3 was the best, but next week maybe weather 2 would be better. And also if you're spreading out the forecast, then you're minimizing the risk if something goes wrong with one and so on. So this is, I think it's a good thing to set first start weight evenly, for example. And to do so easily, you don't have to, for one forecast here, you don't have to one by one right-click weights and set the start weights, but you can actually do this quite fast with this little tip. So if you go here to the selections, then we can add a new one, and we could call this start weights. Then when we're on the manual here, then we can add intervals as well. We can set it to 0.33, 0.33, 0.33, 0, 0.34, like this, for example. Let's add a couple more. Then you can just copy this row like this. But for the last row, instead of putting it evenly, I know that, for example, my weather provider 1 has much longer forecast, then I choose to only take that one for the last one. And then I still put in zeros for the rest, because then we save away because if you don't have anything typed in here, it won't save away the results for follow-up So thank you very much.
The same from me here also. Thank you very much for listening.